New sets can make old decks relevant again by either giving them new cards to help bring them back to life, or by putting out a new deck that the old one just happens to counter. Hey, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we're going to be looking at a deck that I personally feel has been meta relevant for kind of a while. However, this new Silver Tempest set is going to bring us Lugia V-Star, which is assuredly going to be a very popular deck. It's been seeing a ton of success in Japan, and I think it's really hyped here in the western part of the world as well. So now we got to take a look at how can we beat Lugia. I made a video that talks about 5 decks to counter, or like different ways we can counter Lugia. However, we left one out, and that was one that has been getting some resurgence and seeing some success in Japan, and one that I think is a little bit higher on people's radars for Silver Tempest, and that is Duraludon V Max. Arceus Duraludon is a really solid deck, and we're going to talk about a list and some things you can change or add for Silver Tempest. But before we get into the video, if you haven't already, do me a favor, like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of stuff. Tells YouTube this is a good channel and other people should watch it. Let me know what your thoughts are on Arceus Duraludon, its place in the Silver Tempest meta, maybe what decks you're looking forward to, if you pulled any cool cards from Silver Tempest. I want to hear all about that in the comments below. But with that said, let's go ahead and check out this. It comes as no surprise that we need to play some Arceus in our Arceus Duraludon deck. So we're going to have 4 Arceus Vs, and you can go 3 Arceus, you can barely even see those. You can go 2 or 3 Arceus V-Star. Personally, I like to have the 3 just because I really want to make sure that I can pull off a Starburst turn 2 before my opponent throws down a path, before it becomes a little bit late and they start bossing things up or taking some knockouts. So I really want to get Arceus V-Star out very early. Of course, we can't just have Arceus in an Arceus Duraludon deck, so we do need to have... Is this an Italian? Wait, I didn't buy... I never bought it. Where did I get this? Okay. Where did I get it? Oh, whatever. Hey, whatever. Duraludon V, we're using the Champion's Path Duraludon V because it has the hard coat. I mean, if you can't read Italian, it has the hard coat ability, and that lets us take 30 damage less from our opponent's attacks. So they essentially have to do 250 damage to knock out a Duraludon V. Gatling Slug is a pretty awful attack, and a retreat cost of 3 isn't ideal either. Now, what we are going to do is have 3 Duraludon V Maxes. Why do we have so many Duraludon V Maxes? And so, like, why do we have more Duraludon V Maxes than Duraludon Vs? Well, a lot of the times these decks would run something like Single Strike Mustard, so that you can just skip the evolution stage entirely and just go straight to the Duraludon V Max. But really, the answer is you don't want to open a Duraludon V. So we want to minimize our chances of having Duraludon V as our starting Pokemon, because we just saw the attack is terrible and the retreat cost is very high. So there we go. And then we have just one extra Pokemon, and that is a Drapion V. The reason we have Drapion V is because of the Mew matchup. Mew is very good, and it's pretty popular. So we need a card that can handle Mew, and Drapion is exactly the thing to do it. So between Arceus and Duraludon, we can take out one Mew VMAX, and then the last or the second Mew VMAX can be taken out pretty easily by just a single Drapion. Why does this not have something like a Radiant Gardevoir like you see in Arceus Goodra? The reason is because of the prize trade. In Arceus Goodra, they're going to have to take out 3 V-Stars no matter what, because they're all 2 prizes. So giving that extra Pokemon in play really doesn't do anything. All it does is force them to make an extra attack and take a 7 prize game. However, in something like Duraludon VMAX, because this is a 3 prize Pokemon, the ideal game plan is to make our opponent go through an Arceus V-Star and 2 Duraludon VMAXs. Now, we didn't really talk about why is Duraludon VMAX a really good Lugia counter? Well, the answer is because of the Skyscraper ability. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon that have any special energy attached. And Lugia uses exclusively special energy thanks to Archeop's ability Primal Turbo, which specifically says accelerate 2 special energies from your deck to one of your Pokemon. So we get to use something like Duraludon to just completely wall out our opponent's Lugias. It's going to prevent all damage against things like Regis and Mew. Granted, they do have Max Miracle, which is a shred attack. Giratina has a shred attack for 160, which will go through Skyscraper. But, I mean, this does 220, right? G-Max Pulverization does 220 damage. So we're very easily able to go through Giratina Vs. We're going to put a ton of damage onto a Mew VMAX. It's going to be a little bit hard for them to knock out a Duraludon, especially when we have Arceus. So, like I said, they have to knock out an Arceus, which is 2 prizes, then go into a Duraludon. Now that's 3, so there are 5 prizes. If we left a Radiant Pokemon, is a very 120 health Radiant Pokemon for them to KO, that's 6 prizes. We want to force them to take 8. 2, 5, and then another 3 is 8. And in the case of Mew, I guess we can offer up the Drapion, but that's just to close out the game. So, how do we make this work, right? G-Max Pulverization has a weird attack cost of fighting and 2 metal energies. Well, Starburst on Arceus V-Star lets us search our deck for any 2 cards we want. So we get to find any cards we want, probably going to be like a Duraludon or something to help us set up. And then we can use Starburst, we already said Starburst, we can use Trinity Nova, our attack, for 3 colorless energies. It does 200 damage, and then we get to attach 3 basic energies from our deck to our Pokemon V in any way we want, which means if we got Duraludons on the bench, we can power them up immediately using Trinity Nova. So even Trinity Charge on the Arceus V for just a single double turbo energy is enough to get the job done and power up a single Duraludon. So really cool. This does have a pretty decent matchup into something like Palkia because, well, you don't bench a lot of Pokemon, so their attack isn't going to do a ton, and you're hitting super hard with Duraludon, and even Arceus, honestly. One of the bigger challenges for this deck is something like Kyurem, which is one of the most popular decks going into regionals, and even Giratina can be really annoying because it hits super hard with Lost Impact, and Star Requiem just instantly knocks out our Pokemon, so it can be a little difficult, but honestly, between Palkia, Lugia, and Mew, having a good matchup to all those, and then maybe taking a unfavorable matchup to something like Kyurem, or maybe an unfavorable matchup to something like Giratina might be the answer. It's going to be really difficult for one deck to kind of cover the entire meta. It's almost impossible. So anyway, let's move on. Let's say our opponent does do a good amount of damage. They hit us for 280 with something like the Giratina. We can use Hyper Potion to just heal up 120 damage. We got to discard 2 energies from the Pokemon we heal, but you know what? Heal 120 damage, it is pretty decent. We can find all of our Pokemon using Quick Balls, and we have 4 Quick Balls, we're going to have 4 Ultra Balls, and we're going to have 2 Evolution Incense. So, discarding a bunch of cards, finding our Pokemon, we have a lot of Pokemon search, and honestly, a lot of the deck is multiple copies. We have a lot, as you can see, a lot of multiple copies of stuff, so discarding, really not the end of the world. As far as switch outs, Duraludon, they all have really high retreat costs, so Escape Rope can be really nice, and then we have a bunch of switches. We don't want to discard energies to retreat our Duraludon because it's going to be really hard to get those energies back, and we want to save the energies to discard so we can heal with Hyper Potion. So using switch is going to be really, really important, and that's a very good Starburst target if we started a Duraludon and we have an Arceus on the bench. As long as we get an energy onto that Arceus, then the next turn we can Starburst for a switch and a DTE and then power up that Duraludon. So starting Duraludon isn't the biggest thing in the world as long as we can get it out of the active before it becomes too big of a problem. We do have a bunch of Pokegears because we need to be able to find our supporters. Speaking of supporters, we have quite a few of them. We have a Colress's Experiment because sometimes we don't want to discard our entire hand or lose our entire hand if we Marnie or research because maybe we have a Hyper Potion and we just need to find an energy card to attach so that we can use the Hyper Potion. This is where something like Colress really comes into play. It's super, super nice. I think it's a really great addition to a lot of these decks. Marnie, just for a little bit of disruption, a lot of things like Lost Zone decks and Palkia Kyurem decks, they can rack up quite a large hand between using the Greninjas and the Colresses and whatever, and so a little bit of disruption never hurt. And then we do have 2 Professor's Research of our own, so these are our 6 draw supporters, and so we really wanted to use something like Starbirth or Pokegear to find our draw supporters. As far as gusting options, 3 Boss's Orders, these in the Silver Tempest meta can become Serenas, and I think they should be Serenas, personally. When you build this for Silver Tempest, I would replace, if not all of them, at the minimum 2 of these bosses with Serenas, because Serena is such a good card for something like a Duraludon that you can just get totally clunked up by having too many bosses in your hand. So now Serena lets you discard up to 3 cards from your hand and then draw until you have 5, or Boss's Orders one of your opponent's bench Pokemon V, specifically V. But you know what? We're hitting for 220 with the Duraludon VMAX. We're knocking out Mew VMAXs with Drapion. If we're going to use Boss's Orders, it's very likely going to be on a V, so we don't really care. Maybe have 1 Boss's Orders just so we can pull up that Sobble, that Comfey, whatever it is we need, just to get that 6th and final prize, kind of close out the game, but definitely 2 Serenas, for sure. Now, this is going to be a little embarrassing. I don't have big Parasols, so these choice belts pretend they're big Parasols, and big Parasol is very, very important for the Giratina matchup, because Star Requiem just instantly knocks out our opponent's, your opponent's active Pokemon, so we don't want our Duraludon to just get KO'd, and then they take 3 free prizes. So, Big Parasol prevents all effects from our opponent's attacks done to all of our Pokemon when it's attached to the active Pokemon. So, it's going to protect our opponents, our Pokemon from Sableye attacks. It's going to protect against Beedrill if we ran Special Energies, or which if Special Energy is attached. It's going to protect against Giratina. It is a very useful card in the format with Giratina being so successful. You really, really need big Parasols. I know some run 1 and a choice belt, some run 1, a big charm and a choice belt. I think you need 2. There's no guarantee that you're going to be able to find it with Starbirth. You might need to find something else, and then just trying to draw into your single big Parasol when you need it can be really, really difficult. So I think 2, God forbid you prize 1, you're in a lot of trouble against something like Giratina. As far as our stadiums go, we got 2 Crystal Caves, so we can heal a little bit here and there. Between the Crystal Cave and the Hyper Potion, we can heal 150 damage. Not a ton, but it could be just enough to let us live that extra turn, so we can take a knockout, or, whatever it is we're doing, buy that extra turn to do a bunch of extra damage, set up something on the bench. You never know how these Crystal Caves and Hyper Potions can be pretty impactful. Lost City is our other stadium of choice, and the reason we're running something like Lost City is because Radiant Charizard is really popular, especially in Lost Zone decks, so we want to be able to get rid of that Radiant Charizard before it becomes really problematic and they're attacking with it multiple times in a row. It does a ton of damage. They just need to attach a single fire energy towards the end of the game. So now Skyscraper doesn't protect us, and they're just hitting for 250 and it's a single prizer. So playing that Lost City can be really good so that they don't have that really strong attacker anymore. Do keep in mind, Cramorant and Charizard will hit you for 360. If they each attack into a single Duraludon, so that's enough to knock you out, even with a big charm attached. So keep that in mind. You might have some trouble against something like a Lost deck, but this does pretty well against something like Reggie's. We have 4 stadiums to bump things like Path to the Peaks that these Lost Zone decks tend to play, that Reggie Gigas often likes to play if they're not playing something like the Pokestop or Split. Once we get rid of their Path to the Peaks, we don't really care anymore. So I think Lost City is kind of an underrated stadium at the moment. I think more people should be playing it. But as far as our energies are concerned, we got 4 double turbo energies. Why? We really want to draw into it so we can attach to Arceus, Trinity Charge, Trinity Nova. We can attach to a Duraludon so that we can just discard it immediately. And Hyper Potion, really, really useful. And then we have a bunch of metal energies. What do we got? 7 metal energies and then 3 basic fighting energies. Could you go down to 6 metal energies and 4 fighting energies? Sure. Can you? I've seen people throw an Aurora energy in there, so it could be kind of either one. You can kind of split this up. I wouldn't deviate too much from this, because you do need 2 metal energies and 1 fighting energy for Duraludon. But I do think maybe a 6-4 split might be the sweet spot instead of a 7-3. There have been times where I'm like, damn, can't find that last fighting energy. Guess I just lose, and a 4th one would have saved me. So could you throw in a Raihan to get that fighting energy out of the discard onto a Duraludon and then search your deck for whatever you want? Absolutely. Could you throw in... I mean, there's a bunch of different things we can do, but definitely the big thing is Serenas instead of bosses. Yeah, there you go. That's the whole list. I hope you enjoyed, found it informative. If you did, let me know in the comments below. And happy Lugia hunting!